They forced her to sing just to mock her. But when Abby's voice filled the room, their smug smiles vanished. The woman they once ridiculed left them completely speechless. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows of a modest suburban home in Oak Ridge, Connecticut. Abigail "Abby" Turner, 34, hummed softly as she packed lunches for her 2 children. Her melody, though quiet, carried a surprising richness that hinted at something extraordinary. "Mom, you're doing it again," her 12-year-old daughter Emily said with a knowing smile. Abby stopped, realizing she'd been unconsciously singing an aria from Puccini's La Bohème. "Old habits," she replied with a gentle laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. The kitchen walls held few clues about Abby's past, just one small framed photograph tucked among family pictures. It showed a younger Abby at a grand piano, eyes closed in concentration, her face illuminated by spotlight. 15 years had passed since that photo was taken at Westmore Academy of Music, where Abby had once been their most promising vocal talent. Daniel, her husband of 13 years, entered the kitchen and kissed her cheek. "The kid's music teacher mentioned you again yesterday," he said, pouring coffee. "She still can't believe you studied at Westmore." Abby smiled faintly. That was another lifetime. What their neighbors and friends couldn't fully understand was why Abby had walked away from potential stardom. At 19, she'd been on track for an international career when her father suffered a debilitating stroke. With her mother long gone and no siblings to help, Abby made her choice without hesitation. Family first. "No regrets," she often told Daniel during quiet moments, though sometimes he caught her watching performances online, her fingers unconsciously conducting along with the music. That afternoon, while tidying the mail, Abby froze. An elegant cream envelope bore the embossed gold seal of the Westmore Academy of Music. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. "Celebrating 25 years of musical excellence," she read aloud. "The board of directors requests the honor of your presence." Daniel watched her face carefully. "The big anniversary gala?" Abby nodded, scanning the invitation. "They're gathering alumni. I can't imagine why they'd include me." "Because you were extraordinary," Daniel said simply. She shook her head. "I was a student who never graduated. They've probably invited everyone from that era." She placed the invitation on the counter, intending to discard it later. That evening, after the children were asleep, Daniel found Abby in their small study. She was watching a video on her laptop, headphones on, completely absorbed. He recognized what it was without seeing the screen. The last recital she'd performed at Westmore before leaving. He'd seen her watch it perhaps 3 times in their marriage, always when she thought no one was looking. "You should go," he said when she noticed him. "To the gala? I don't belong in that world anymore." She closed the laptop. "Those people chase acclaim and recognition. I chose a different path." Daniel sat beside her. "Maybe it's not about them. Maybe it's about making peace with a part of yourself you've kept locked away." Later that night, Abby found herself opening an old trunk in their attic. Inside lay sheet music, programs, and notebooks from her Westmore days. Her fingers traced the notes she'd once annotated with such care. Among them was a composition she'd written, never performed, never heard by anyone but her. In the stillness, she hummed a few bars, surprised that the melody remained so vivid in her memory. The music felt like meeting an old friend, familiar yet distant. The following morning, Abby found herself typing a response to the invitation. "Thank you for including me. I would be honored to attend." Her finger hovered over the send button for several seconds before she finally pressed it. Something both terrifying and exhilarating stirred within her. A door long closed was about to reopen. The evening of the gala arrived with an unexpected spring chill. As Daniel helped Abby prepare, he noticed her growing anxiety. "You look beautiful," he assured her, watching as she smoothed the simple beige vintage dress she'd chosen, the only formal attire she owned, purchased years ago for a cousin's wedding. "It's not about how I look," Abby replied, studying her reflection. "It's about facing a choice I made 15 years ago, and all the people who never understood it." She'd kept her appearance simple, minimal makeup, hair natural and unadorned. In the mirror, she looked nothing like the glamorous sopranos who now graced the stages she once dreamed of commanding. "Remember?" Daniel said as he dropped her at the gleaming facade of the Manhattan venue. You have nothing to prove to these people. The grand hall of the Westmore Anniversary Gala glittered with crystal chandeliers and success. Distinguished alumni mingled with wealthy donors, celebrated conductors, and renowned performers. The air itself seemed charged with accomplishment and ambition. Abby hesitated at the entrance, suddenly feeling every inch the outsider. Women in designer gowns adorned with jewelry worth more than her mortgage glided past. Men in impeccable tuxedos discussed upcoming seasons at the Met and Carnegie Hall. Abigail Turner? Is that really you? Professor Eleanor Winters, now in her 70s, approached with genuine warmth. The woman who had once been Abby's vocal coach embraced her former student. "I never thought I'd see you here," she said, examining Abby's face with kind eyes. What a wonderful surprise. Their conversation was cut short by a commotion near the main stage. A group had formed around a tall, distinguished man whose silver-streaked beard and confident stance commanded attention. Even from a distance, Abby recognized him immediately. Lawrence Blackwood, once her closest competitor at Westmore, now one of the most celebrated conductors in the country. "He's just been appointed artistic director at the National Symphony," Professor Winters whispered, "the youngest in their history." Abby nodded, remembering the intense rivalry they had once shared, talent matched only by their contrasting approaches to music. Where she sought emotional truth, Lawrence pursued technical perfection. Abigail Turner. His voice carried across the crowd as he spotted her. Conversations quieted as heads turned. The prodigy who disappeared. He approached with a glass of champagne in hand, his entourage following. Up close, his success was etched in every line of his face, in the confident set of his shoulders, in the way others deferred to his presence. "Lawrence," she acknowledged evenly. "When they told me you might attend, I could hardly believe it." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "What have you been doing with all that potential?" There was a subtle emphasis on the last word that made several people in his circle exchange knowing glances. "I've been living my life," Abby replied simply. "How quaint." Lawrence gestured to a woman beside him. "Olivia here just completed her third world tour, and Marcus has been commissioned by the Vienna Philharmonic." Each introduction felt like a subtle barb, highlighting paths Abby hadn't taken. "How fortunate for them," Abby said, maintaining her composure even as she felt increasingly out of place. As the evening progressed, Abby found herself cornered by Lawrence and his admirers near the bar, their questions becoming more pointed. "Don't you miss it?" asked a woman who'd introduced herself as a former classmate, though Abby barely remembered her. "The applause? The recognition? Did you ever try to return?" another inquired with feigned concern. "I made my choice," Abby answered, the repetition becoming tiresome. "Family needed me." Lawrence swirled his drink thoughtfully. "We all face choices, Abigail. Some of us choose greatness." The quiet contempt in his voice stirred something in Abby. Not anger, but a sadness for what he failed to understand about her decision. The formal program began with speeches celebrating the institution's legacy. Distinguished alumni were acknowledged, thunderous applause following each familiar name. From her table at the back, Abby watched silently. Then Lawrence took the stage as the evening's honored speaker. His charisma was undeniable as he spoke of dedication, sacrifice, and the pursuit of musical excellence. "Talent," he proclaimed, scanning the room, "is nothing without the courage to pursue it relentlessly. Some among us had that talent." His eyes found Abby in the crowd, but lacked the commitment to see it through. A murmur rippled through the audience as several people glanced in her direction. "In fact," Lawrence continued, his smile turning predatory, "we have a unique opportunity tonight. Among us is someone whose voice once promised greatness, before she chose obscurity." The spotlight swung wildly before finding Abby, illuminating her startled face for all to see. "Abigail Turner," Lawrence announced, extending his hand toward the stage. "Perhaps you'd honor us with a song, show us what might have been?" The request hung in the air, wrapped in the guise of an honor, but transparent in its cruelty. Around her, faces turned with curious expectation, some with undisguised schadenfreude, eager to witness the humiliation of a woman believed to have wasted her gifts. "I didn't come here to perform," Abby said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Come now," Lawrence pressed, his voice carrying through the microphone. Surely you remember how? Or has domestic life erased even that? Laughter rippled through sections of the audience. Not everyone, but enough to sting. Professor Winters rose from her seat, indignation clear on her face, but Abby gently touched her arm. This moment of mockery had been building all evening, perhaps all 15 years. One song, Lawrence insisted, his challenge clear. Unless, of course, you can't. If you're enjoying this story of unexpected triumph, hit the subscribe button now. You won't want to miss what happens next. Abby felt dozens of eyes upon her, some sympathetic, most curious, and several, including Lawrence's, gleaming with anticipated satisfaction at her expected failure. She thought of her children at home, of Daniel who believed in her talent even when she'd locked it away. She thought of her father, now gone, who had never once made her feel guilty for the career she'd abandoned for his care. Very well, she said softly, rising from her chair. The path to the stage felt impossibly long. Her simple beige dress stood in stark contrast to the formal attire surrounding her. She heard whispers as she passed. 15 years without training. Probably can't hit a proper note anymore. Poor thing, he's cornered her completely. Lawrence stood center stage, his expression one of feigned collegial welcome. He extended his hand with theatrical gallantry. Ladies and gentlemen, Abigail Turner, returning to Westmore after 15 years. He leaned close as he handed her the microphone, whispering, "Try not to embarrass yourself too thoroughly." Abby took her position on the small stage, facing the sea of disbelieving faces. The elegant hall with its crystal chandeliers suddenly felt suffocating. In the front row, Lawrence took his seat, leaning back with a satisfied smirk that said he'd already won. She stood frozen, microphone in hand, heart hammering against her ribs. For a terrible moment, she feared her voice would fail her entirely. An older man with a gray beard in the audience caught her eye. He wasn't hiding his amusement at her discomfort, whispering something to his companion that made them both chuckle. The spotlight felt hot, unforgiving. Abby closed her eyes briefly. In that darkness, she wasn't in a hall full of judgmental former peers. She was in her kitchen, singing lullabies to her children. She was in her garden, humming as she tended her flowers. She was in her father's hospital room, her voice bringing him comfort when words couldn't reach him. Music had never left her. It had simply transformed, becoming something intimate rather than performative. She opened her eyes. "I'll need a pianist," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Lawrence gestured dismissively to the grand piano in the corner where a young musician sat ready. "Jonathan will accompany you. What will you be attempting?" The word attempting hung in the air, another small cruelty. Abby looked directly at the pianist. "Do you know O mio babino caro?" The young man nodded, surprised by her choice. One of opera's most beloved but challenging arias. As she waited for him to prepare, Abby surveyed the room. Some faces showed pity, others anticipation of failure. Lawrence's expression remained one of barely concealed triumph. He believed he'd already won this moment, reducing her to an object lesson in wasted potential. The pianist played the opening notes, and Abby took a deep breath. The first note hung in the air, pure and unwavering. Heads that had been bent in whispered conversation snapped up. Lawrence's smug smile faltered. Abby's voice filled the hall with a richness and emotional depth that silenced every murmur. The technical prowess was impressive enough. Her control, her perfect pitch, her seemingly effortless movement through the challenging passages. But it was something more that captivated the audience. Each note carried 15 years of unsung emotions: joy, grief, love, sacrifice, contentment. Her voice told the story not just of Puccini's love-struck Loretta, but of Abby Turner herself, a woman who had chosen a different kind of fulfillment than the one expected of her. In the front row, Lawrence sat rigidly upright, his expression transitioning from disbelief to shock. The man with the gray beard who had laughed at her moments before now leaned forward, his mouth slightly open in astonishment. Professor Winters pressed a handkerchief to her eyes, witnessing the full flowering of a talent she had recognized decades ago. Throughout the room, faces registered the collective realization that they were hearing something extraordinary, not just technically perfect, but profoundly moving. As Abby approached the aria's emotional climax, her voice soared with a power that seemed impossible coming from her slight frame. The final notes resonated through the hall with crystalline perfection. carrying both technical brilliance and heart-wrenching emotion. Then, silence. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved, no one breathed. The spell her voice had cast remained unbroken. Then Professor Winters rose to her feet, tears streaming openly down her face, and began to applaud. Like a wave, others followed, first a few, then dozens, then the entire assembly rising in a standing ovation. Thunderous applause echoed through the grand hall. Several of the professional musicians present appeared genuinely moved, nodding in respect. Critics who had attended as guests exchanged meaningful glances, already mentally composing the articles they would write. Even Lawrence's inner circle broke ranks, caught up in the genuine artistic moment they had witnessed. Only Lawrence himself remained seated, his face a complex mixture of emotions, admiration warring with the disintegration of his narrative about her. Abby stood still in the center of the stage, almost surprised by the response. The validation of the applause was gratifying, but she realized with sudden clarity that she hadn't needed it. The joy had been in the singing itself, something she had denied herself for too long. When the applause finally began to subside, she gently handed the microphone back to the master of ceremonies and moved to step down from the stage. "Wait," called a voice from the audience. It was Marcus Reed, the composer Lawrence had mentioned earlier. "Would you consider one more? Perhaps something from Verdi?" "Or Mozart," suggested another celebrated vocalist. Abby smiled graciously but shook her head. "Thank you, but that was enough." As she made her way back through the crowd, people reached out to touch her arm, to offer compliments, to express wonder. Where they had looked through her before, they now saw her clearly. Lawrence finally rose from his seat and intercepted her path. "Abigail," he said, his voice lower, humbled despite himself. "I had no idea you had maintained such excellence." She regarded him calmly. "You never understood what music meant to me, Lawrence. It was never about excellence." "We should talk," he pressed. "With a voice like that, even after all these years, there are opportunities, connections I could help you make." There was a genuine offer beneath his words, but also an attempt to reassert control, to position himself as the gatekeeper to a world she had supposedly lost. Abby's smile was gentle but firm. "I appreciate the thought, but I have a life I love. Music has always been part of it, just not in the way you understand." The remainder of the evening unfolded like a dream. People who had dismissed Abby hours earlier now sought her out, asking about her life, her choices, where she had hidden such talent all these years. She answered graciously but without apology for the path she had chosen. Some understood, others clearly did not, seeing only what they perceived as wasted opportunity. As the crowd began to thin, Professor Winters found her by the grand windows overlooking the city lights. "I always wondered if you regretted your choice," the elderly woman said. Abby considered the question carefully. "I regretted losing music as I knew it then, but I never regretted choosing my family." "You never truly lost it," Professor Winters observed. "Your voice has matured in ways it might not have if you'd followed the expected path. There's a depth there, something genuine that many technically perfect singers never achieve." Lawrence approached again, more composed now, flanked by 2 board members of the New York Philharmonic. "We're discussing the possibility of a special showcase next month," he said, his tone professionally cordial. "Featured alumni, you would be a highlight. A literal overnight sensation," one of the board members added enthusiastically. Abby recognized the offer for what it was, a doorway back to the path she'd left behind. The temptation was stronger than she'd expected. "I'm flattered," she began carefully, "but my life is in Connecticut. My family—" "Arrangements can be made," Lawrence interrupted. "Weekend rehearsals. We can work around your domestic obligations." The slight condescension in his phrasing clarified everything for Abby. "My domestic obligations, as you call them, aren't burdens I work around, Lawrence. They're choices I embrace fully." She looked him directly in the eyes. "When was the last time you sang simply for the joy of it, not for an audience or critics or your reputation?" His expression revealed the answer before he could formulate a response. "I don't need spotlights or reviews to affirm that music matters in my life," she continued gently. "Though I thank you for the reminder that I've been keeping my voice too much to myself." As she prepared to leave, Professor Winters pressed a business card into her hand. "The community music school downtown is looking for a vocal instructor," she said. "2 evenings a week, something to consider. On your terms." Abby looked at the card, a warmth spreading through her at the thought of teaching others to find their voice. "I might just do that," she said. Outside, the spring night air felt fresh and clarifying. As she waited for her car, Abby hummed softly to herself, not Puccini or Verdi, but a simple melody she'd composed years ago for her children. Daniel was waiting up when she arrived home, his expectant expression asking the question before he could. "It was illuminating," she said, sitting beside him. She recounted the evening, the initial dismissal, Lawrence's public challenge, and what had followed. As she described the performance, her eyes grew bright with rekindled passion. "They offered me opportunities," she concluded, "a chance at what might have been." "And?" Daniel asked carefully. "And I realized something." Abby took his hand. "I don't want what might have been. I want what is, with a little more music in it." 2 months later, Abby stood in a renovated storefront in their town, surveying the space that would soon become Turner Vocal Studio. Twice weekly, she would teach children and adults to find their authentic voice. On her desk sat a framed review from the Westmore Gala that had circulated widely in musical circles, describing a voice of rare emotional truth. But more meaningful was the composition notebook beside it, filled with new music she was creating, songs that blended her classical training with the life wisdom she'd gained away from the spotlight. In the small practice room, her daughter Emily was picking out a melody on the piano, showing the same natural talent Abby had at her age. "Mom," Emily called, "can you help me with this part?" Abby smiled, recognizing that her legacy would not be measured in grand performances or critical acclaim, but in moments like these, sharing the pure joy of music with those she loved most. She began to sing, her voice filling the simple room with as much beauty and passion as it had the grand hall with its crystal chandeliers. Some choices, she reflected, weren't about what you give up, but about what you gain instead. Share your story with us. Where are you watching from today? If this tale of rediscovery touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and join our community of storytellers and listeners who believe in second chances and unexpected triumphs. What parts of yourself have you set aside in life's relentless march forward? What gifts, what passions lie dormant within you, waiting patiently for their moment to shine once more? Abby's journey isn't just a story of musical redemption. It's a mirror reflecting back the choices we all make when life demands compromise. Those talents we shelve, those dreams we postpone, they don't vanish into the ether. They remain, quietly beating like a second heart beneath our everyday existence. Think about it. How many of us have surrendered pieces of ourselves to the practical demands of our lives? The painter who set aside her brushes to raise a family, the writer whose novels exist only in the margins of busy days, the musician whose instrument gathers dust in a forgotten corner. But what Abby discovered, what her moment on that stage revealed, is that when we reclaim these buried parts of ourselves, they emerge not diminished, but transformed, enriched by life's journey, deepened by our struggles, more authentic than they ever could have been before. In the soft glow of our community's shared stories, we've witnessed countless moments of rediscovery. The retired teacher who returned to poetry after 40 years, the grandfather who picked up his saxophone after a lifetime of silence, the woman who finally published her first book at 73. These aren't stories of regret, they're testaments to the enduring spirit that refuses to be permanently silenced. They remind us that it's never too late to let your authentic voice be heard, never too late to surprise the world with the gifts you've kept hidden. If Abby's journey has stirred something in you, some long-forgotten passion, some talent pushed aside by life's demands, honor that feeling. It's a sacred whisper from the person you once were to the person you still are. Until our next journey together, remember, the most powerful note is often the one that follows a long silence.